Welcome back to Saving the Republic with Joe Staten, presented by Grab Your Gear Network, where we bring you guys the news that you need to hear about 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. And here we primarily speak to merit shop workers, trade workers, and just hardworking Americans. And something I think the news misses out on quite a bit is tying in why the news matters in your life and not necessarily talking about these, over like just massive ideas that really aren't going to impact you. Some of the culture war topics would be an example of that, but we like to focus in on specific stories and policies that are going to impact your life. And we try to get a diverse perspective. So today, Fridays, we're going to be having our friend Mark Rogers join us, and Mark's back again today. So thanks, Mark, for joining the show. And how was your Thanksgiving holiday?
It was a great Thanksgiving holiday. For 19 years, I was at ESPN working every Thanksgiving. So that wasn't a whole lot of fun. So it's been nice over the last 4 or 5 years to experience the holiday with family and friends. So in particular, some of my best friends. And yeah, we had a great celebration on Thanksgiving.
Hopefully you got some decent holiday pay at ESPN for working the holidays, but I'm not sure. I mean, the company might view Thanksgiving in a certain, we're going to get into that actually in a couple seconds here, but I don't know if ESPN would necessarily as a company want to celebrate Thanksgiving with the liberal, turn they've kind of taken.
Since I haven't been there for 4 years, who knows what's going on at this point? I can only imagine the way it was spiraling at the point that I left, what it's descended to. Now, me getting paid on Thanksgiving, no, I was a salaried worker, so it did me no good. Now the staff making, at times it was 1.5, and then it fluctuated to 2.5 times the hourly wage was a pretty good deal for them.
Well, it tends to be a special week, and we have the holidays coming, Christmas coming up. We have another holiday and the game that you and I look forward to, Michigan, Ohio State, a lot of Midwesterners. So it's a great time of the year we can appreciate. And, I did want to touch on that in today's show. And we're going to get into later the border and something President Trump recently did in regards to the border, and also touch on some of his appointees. But firstly, Mark, I guess, what do you have to say about, I guess, the holiday Thanksgiving in general? This is a holiday that America has long cherished, and I think culturally wasn't really debated much to be a controversial holiday until maybe the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, 15, 20 years. I remember when I was coming up in school, I'm 25 now, I started hearing, rumbles from a certain population, even in my classmates, talking about how, America was founded upon, racist principles and evil roots, and this holiday should not be celebrated. We came over here and colonized and massacred. So, I mean, what do you have to say to that? Do you agree that, should we celebrate Thanksgiving? Should we be proud of this holiday? Because I tend to think we should.
Well, first, I have a message for those people in particular, whether it's toward Thanksgiving and a number of other cherished holidays in this country, that they are basically showing just the highest level of hypocrisy. So they're taking part in these holidays, they're benefiting from them, they're celebrating, but then they're taking their social media stance and warrior status to speak out against them, but they're taking part in them and celebrating them. So I don't really necessarily can I understand in any way taking part in something. So for example, Halloween, I determined at one point that I didn't want to take part in Halloween, so I don't take part in Halloween. I don't celebrate it. I don't benefit in any way from Halloween or enjoy it. Therefore, I think that those people first of all, need to take an actual principled stance. So don't partake in Thanksgiving if you don't agree with the origins of the holiday. Okay, regardless of where we've arrived or where the origins of some of these holidays and some of these events started, again, I think we have, number one, a huge issue in this country among people that are bound by their place and time. They're bound by the the current, oh shoot, I'm sorry, Joe. I'm going to lose power. I was charging this
It's
all night.
okay. I'll just cut it here. So do
I'll
you
be
need
right
to,
Sorry.
okay, no worries.
We are bound, a lot of people are, by time and place, meaning that they're locked into 2024 and have no ability to go back in time and understand the conditions, the values, the circumstances involving a lot of decisions that were made at various points in history. So it's easy to look back upon those times with some kind of moral, righteous judgment upon individuals. So that, I think, goes deep into all of these issues in regards to looking back to the 1950s or 60s, or going back all the way to that time of the Pilgrims. So that I think is a huge issue here, and it's the celebration of what they freed themselves from, what stance that they took in England, and securing freedom for themselves and for future generations, and the hardships that they endured that we cannot imagine in any such way. It's cleaned up, of course, and it is for school children, and it should be to a certain extent, but it was a bloody, difficult, brutal existence that they had to endure. And for those people to have gone through that and faced the type of adversity, again, the weather conditions and the sicknesses and diseases, and just brutal sicknesses and deaths to endure and to forge this country. Again, I just can't fathom the person who I want us to be, to recognize and to be cognizant of the entire story, the entire picture, all the facts, all the truth that we've gleaned from these incidents that have led to our country's current status, our history, but also with an understanding of what these people faced, what their challenges were, and this revisionist history of mindset and values is just, to me, it's really disgusting.
Yeah, your first point there about people who partake in the holiday and they enjoy the fruits of Thanksgiving, because let's be honest, everybody loves getting together with the family and having tasty meals and turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes. Everybody loves that, and yeah, they do partake in it. And it reminds me of the Bernie Sanders type that calls out capitalism for the evil that it is. All the while building a multi-million-dollar legacy and fortune for himself. It's easy to criticize, or somebody who calls for refugees and open borders but doesn't want to open their home to the same refugees. So I think we should practice what we preach and realize too, this is a core tenet of the worldview that led to this great country. But everybody's not perfect. Human beings are flawed. We make mistakes, and the country was founded on ideas. And yes, we do have some blemishes on the record, but what it has led to is the most prosperous society in the history of the world that has lifted so many people out of poverty. It's lifted so many people out of hard situations, and I think we should reconcile those two things. And just quickly too, I think it's interesting because we debate here in America in modern times. What is the place of the church? What is the place of religion? And people say, separation of church and state is a thing, which that's a whole nother topic of discussion. So I don't know if you know the background on that, Mark, but it was, a letter that Jefferson wrote, that was not even, a policy. It was nowhere in the Constitution, nothing like that. So, but an interesting tenet to this whole conversation is a speech that the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Winthrop, gave in 1630. And just a small segment from his speech, he says, "Now the only way to avoid the shipwreck and to provide for our posterity is to follow the counsel of Micah, to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with our God. For this end, we must be knit together in this work as one man. We must entertain each other in brotherly affection. We must be willing to abridge ourselves of our superfluities for the supply of others' necessities. We must uphold a familiar commerce together in all meekness, gentleness, patience, and liberality. We must delight in each other, make others' conditions our own, rejoice together, mourn together, so on and so forth. It goes on. I would recommend everybody take a look at that speech, even as we just reflect on this holiday. But just what do you think about that, Mark? Do you think that we have kind of lost our sense of identity in this country? Because reading that, it really makes me think about that and think about the common fabric that we once had as a country. And maybe you could say there's a resurgence happening right now with Christianity. I think there is a trend among young people to go back toward tradition and religion. But what do you think about where our country stands in terms of religion?
Well, I think as I listen to those words, there's a cultural or a community base to that, meaning that we care for each other, we take up each other's causes, burdens, that sort of thing. That's not coerced from us by the government. That's not mandated by the government, but that's just a value that we intrinsically have based on this foundation that God is our creator. He made us all equal and worthy of respect and a certain level of living and opportunity, and that we should safeguard that. And there should be this communal thought that we're building a nation of brothers and sisters, and we're all in this together to build for the common good, as long as, again, everyone is contributing and everyone is working. So there is a tension there of individual pursuit versus looking out for others. But I think our society has become very individualistic. My goals, my dreams, my value, the attention given to me, social media, look at me, look how great I am, my ambition. And I don't want to, again, have those values that I just preface to be forced by the government. There have been several studies done about giving, charity, even outside of, so liberals will argue, well, charitable contributions from the conservatives are going strictly to religion. And even when that's extracted from the accounting, there have been many studies done through the years that conservatives give more to charity because it's out of love, it's out of duty, it's out of respect for God, respect for the common man and fellow man, and it's done out of this value system of I've been given so much, I'm going to give out of my overflow. Or even if I have to give out of sacrifice, I will do that and cut back on what is mine versus what I believe that God wants me to give to others. But this isn't coerced and taken from me by the government to be corrupted and contaminated and wasted.
Yeah, community is something that cannot be forced by policy, and look at the church. The church, I think, and also, our audience here in this network, Grab Your Gear Network, the traditional Americans that really still work the jobs that we speak to, electricians and plumbers and people that do jobs that a lot of people don't want to do. These are hardworking traditional people. They have families, they do go to church, they attend church, and they're part of these communities. And I think the community is so important in America. And a lot of the issues that the left will point you to and say, this is the government's job to take care of this. A lot of the times, traditionally it was the community, the church community that assisted in those things, whether it was, healthcare or, taking care of somebody when they're getting older in age. These were things that the community would step up and do. And we've become so isolated in our society that it has forced people to look toward Big Brother for assistance and think that we need this massive bureaucracy to do everything that we want to do in life. And it's just a complete breakaway in the vision that John Winthrop and that all the founders held, is that it's not the government's job. It's the community's job. It's the individual's job to build these safety nets within their own communities. And so I guess that's a good somewhat of a segue into our next topic here, which is the difference in leadership that we are seeing with President Trump already. And this is the, he's not even taken office yet. And just quickly, Mark, we're going to go to immigration, but I want to talk about something else really quickly, which was, I don't know if you saw this, and I should have told you, briefed you on this, but Vladimir Putin in Russia has come out and said that the Biden administration is effectively trying to force world conflict and to set up Trump for failure. And he says Russia is not going to, as much as they can, they're not going to let that happen. They're not going to they're not going to judge the Trump administration by these crazy things we're seeing Biden do, which, for example, sending in missiles, approving the use of long-range U.S. missiles in Russia. He essentially said, we're not going to view Trump as they're trying to cast him so long as we're not actively already at war with the United States, and further said he thinks Trump's life is still in danger and the state is trying to kill him. So, he's perceiving already that Trump, he's not even president yet, but the impact he's having is profound. So just any opening thoughts on the difference you have seen or anything else you have seen of how the world has reacted, how the media has reacted, how everybody's reacted? Because to me, it seems like the world is acting like Trump is already president.
So, number one, I'm not necessarily going to take what Vladimir Putin has to say as being truth and gospel. So I kind of measure those words for one thing. Neither denying what he had to say and saying that there wasn't honest intent there, but at the same time, it's difficult for me to measure those words. And so I got to take what he had to say and then lump it into everything else that's going on and being said. But it is amazing that both sides are treating President Trump as taking command of this country and being the leader. The liberals, from the negative standpoint, that their lives are over, that they're in danger, that they're running scared and crying and having conniption fits left and right. From the conservative side, it's this galvanized effort that, okay, it's time to take back the country, take hold of it. There's no time to waste. Let's make these appointments. Let's start to plan and build out this mission and these purposes. So that's good to see. But yes, on the international stage, I think part of that has to do with just this complete lackadaisical days. This non-assertive, just kind of neutral, can't think of a good term for it.
Posture,
the
maybe.
Biden administration, just this lack of assertiveness that the Biden administration has had for months and months and months, pretty much since it's been determined that he wouldn't be the next president, that they're just letting things float around and there's really no direction to policy and so forth. So there needs to be someone to step in the gap. And so
yeah,
I think, and it's such a dichotomy of personalities and such a difference in policy, personality, agenda, values, all those things, that is just such a break in the transition is just startling, the difference. Now, on top of that, I'll just say quickly that if it is true what Putin said, if he's reading this correctly, then I can't think of too many things that are more despicable than to put personal vendettas, to put party lines, to put partisanship and just general clash of ideologies ahead of the good of the country to set up somebody for failure that's going to affect and impact 330 million people. That's a despicable tack to take.
Oh, don't even get me started on that. We could go down that path. And honestly, when you talk about, the vacuum that was left by the Biden administration. So I wrote a piece for Daily Caller a couple months ago about, Joe Biden, in a metaphorical sense, was stuck between the river and the sea with Israel because he would not take a stance. It split his constituency. He didn't know what to do. And it wasn't necessarily his lack of a decision. It was just he realized his foreign policy decision was not going to be based upon what was best for the U.S. necessarily. It was going to be, I'm worried about losing votes that are pro-Israel. And then he was worried about losing votes that are pro-Palestine. And so, yeah, there was just, first of all, the lack of assertiveness, as you were saying. But then, I've seen a bunch of memes that are like, it's like, all right, like dad's coming home from work, and the world starts to shift as if, okay, we're done messing around. Now we do have somebody who's actually going to come in and he's going to do what he said he was going to do. And people know they can't just push the U.S. around anymore. And so it's just interesting to watch, how the world is acting. And it's just crazy that they are treating the president elect, which I guess to a certain degree they should, but they're treating the president elect as the president because where is the president? Is he on the beach? Is Kamala Harris running the country? So we're all wondering that same question. But secondly, on this point, the piece I was going to touch on here regarding immigration was that we've seen Donald Trump. He put out a Truth Social, and I'm trying to pull it up here. Don't know if I can do that, but I'll just read it. He said, just had a wonderful conversation with the new president of Mexico, Claudia Pardo. She has agreed to stop migration through Mexico and into the U.S., effectively closing our southern border. Let's see. He said it was a very productive conversation. So one phone call, and the president of Mexico has since then come out and said, well, we're not actually changing our policy. We're not making any, substantive changes yet. So she kind of walked back what Trump was parading as a victory. But nonetheless, I mean, even that alone, whether she agreed fully or not, I think she understands what the president is going to do. And I think seeing that reaction further proves what we're seeing here, which is that the world is reacting differently to a President Donald Trump than it would to a President Joe Biden. And so, Mark, the question is, how is this president's policy on immigration, how do you see it impacting the lives of everyday Americans following this avalanche of, for 4 years, the pictures that you see of caravans coming over the border, and towns like Springfield, Ohio, and towns across the nation like Aurora, Colorado, that were having these problems, and innocent Americans getting killed, which we don't want to broad brush. Many immigrants are hardworking people. They're not all murderers, but the bottom line is that when you don't vet people, that's a possibility. So how do you see this new policy that Mexico is reacting to? How do you see that impacting the lives of everyday Americans?
Well, back to the phone call, I think that's the political arena that Trump is completely in a different place on, where I got to think, okay, two people have a phone call. Their interpretation of the phone call may be very much aligned, or it may have some discrepancies based on their memory of what was decided or agreed upon that was very unofficial. We know Trump is Trump, and therefore he's going to be transparent. He's going to sound, and then he's going to also be smart enough to take advantage of that interaction to promote the positive nature of it and what can be achieved from it, while she's probably a bit scared to unveil what was agreed upon and so forth. So she's playing the politician's role, and he's just being himself. It's incredible to me that we even have this discussion in this country regarding our own sovereignty, our own laws. People act like Trump is going to do something new, something different. Well, he is in actually enforcing the laws on the books already. So what he is doing in regards to shutting down the border, of course we want to vet incoming people. And yes, none of us know what the percentages are. We've got vague documentation. 500,000 documented criminals have come into the country. I think that's the number that's out there. So we have some idea, but it's not about how horrible these people are, which we know it's a cross section of a population where Some of them are, yes, extremely hardworking, will come over here, be productive citizens. Others will be just a complete drain on the system, and others will be uh, just violent and horrific in any way possible. So those people need to be vetted. It's there will still be immigration in this country, but it needs to be shut down and vetted and reorganized and set and reset going forward. And what the except for those people on the left side of the aisle that have the obvious intent of bringing people into this country to swing votes. Other than that purpose and intent, I really can only uh, take their viewpoint as being just complete ignorance and blindness to to their social justice stance as being just great people that are welcoming to everyone, and just completely ignoring and being, again, unaware and blind to the realities of life and the types of people that are coming over in these cartels and caravans that it's been obviously shown to be harmful by way of drug smuggling, human trafficking. It's just deplorable.
It's always been bewildering to me that the United States is the only country which does not have the right to protect its cultural identity. And many on the left will say, "Oh, well, that's just white nationalist or white supremacist or whatever you want to say, Christian nationalist thinking." And no, it's just the simple line of thinking is, let's make sure people who are coming to the country actually love America, and let's make sure that they actually believe in our core principles: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble. These are kind of important things you want to make sure before somebody comes and lives in your country and yeah, has the potential. Some people, and maybe it's a geographical thing where they're from and their country and their culture. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just because human beings can be evil. But some people who come through the border have been people that genuinely have no care for human life. They have no regard. These are people who have literally, the Lake and Riley case. I don't know if you've followed that at all, but bashed her head in with a rock. I mean, I'm sorry to be graphic, but it's just what it is. We can't have people coming in that even have, as much as we can see, as much as we can vet, the potential to do that. So I personally, bringing this back home for our listeners, I'm excited to see the impact of this, because this is a good example of how federal policy can have a significant impact on your individual life in certain areas. Some areas, maybe not as much, but this is something where the posture of the executive is really important. And if they're actively seeking out, people who are violating these laws, in fact, the border czar, to so to speak, Tom Homan, the new one that Trump appointed, was on record saying to the Denver mayor, because the Denver mayor was like, "Yeah, we're not going to enforce this law," and Tom Homan was like, "Okay, go ahead and try, because we're going to enforce the law, and under federal law, if you obstruct the removal of illegal immigrants, you will go to jail." And so, do we really want to put a mayor in jail in America? No, but we do want to uphold our laws. So it's good to see that shift in posture. And so I'm just excited to see what the effect of that is. And I think it could be a profound impact on our communities. But anything you want to touch up on there before we go to our last topic?
Well, I think the cultural impact that you touched upon, and you shaped it very well in regards to people trying to change our way of life and then demonizing our way of life in order to enact that change. If I had made the decision to move to another country, it would be because I had found that place to be a place where I wanted to live based on their culture, the benefits there, the opportunity, and all the things. And then certainly if I had remnants of my culture that I wanted to bring to that culture and practice within my own home or my own small family community, that's fine. That's, of course, allowed and even encouraged in this country to a large extent. That's fine. But the idea that we don't have an identity, that we don't have, and that we don't have foundational beliefs, values in this country, and that other people need to come into the country understanding that they have to operate within those beliefs. They have to contribute to it to a certain extent. They can practice or have the freedom to believe whatever they want, and as long as they're not breaking laws within their own homes, carry on their ethnic beliefs, their cultural beliefs, their traditions. All those things are beyond accepted. They're encouraged in this country, but we have to get back to understanding that we, and you said it very well, that we seem to be the only country in the world where there has become this backlash against the foundation of the culture and the values that made this country the greatest in the world.
Yeah, it's just it's one of those things that you kind of have to scratch your head on. But I think the public is definitely waking up to this, and it's encouraging to see the potential effects of this new administration. And to wrap us all up here, Mark, I wanted to lastly ask you this question, because this week I made a video, a show on Trump's labor secretary selection, and this was a person who the left is celebrating. And when that happens, you kind of have to take a step back and say, okay, not that I'm closed minded to think that there couldn't be somebody that the left would approve of that could be good, but why are they doing this? And something we talk about a lot here at Grab Your Gear, especially if you check out our documentary, we talk about some of the inner workings of labor unions and how they are negatively impacting conservatives. They were actually the number one contributor to the Issue 1 campaign in Ohio, where abortion was enshrined in the Constitution. Labor unions were the number one contributor in terms of money. And when you look at, things like, we could go down the list, but, project labor agreements where companies have to comply with DEI standards, with transgender hiring quotas to do these projects that are just unattainable for normal contractors. There's just right now there is a divide between being able to support unions and also being conservative, because some of the ideologies just clash. And so I know that you're not necessarily in this world every single day in terms of unions and that whole policy debate and some of the details of it, but I just wanted to ask you, it's great that we have this coalition of people coming together, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, some people that are kind of former Democrats who have good ideas that we are bringing into the fold. But do you see a line that we should draw as conservatives that say, hey, we should be accepting and we should be a broad coalition, but we still have values? Like, do you see a line? And if so, what are some of those values that you see?
Well, there's a lot of wisdom and discernment that needs to be applied here. Leading into the election and post-election, I have found myself watching a lot of debates from previous generations, the 80s, the 90s, the Ross Perot's, the Al Gore's, the Bill Clintons, Reagan's and Bush, and so forth and so on. And just the stark contrast of that level of debate and the differences between the parties and left and right, and to contrast that to now is amazing, because I think at one point we were in this country where you could generally, with honesty, deal with the other side and assume to a certain extent good intent. And I'm not in any way saying that there wasn't corruption during those times. There certainly was. But there seemed to be the matters at hand, the topics, the subjects that mattered were so inherent to all of us. Military might, security, protection, economic wealth, certainly debates about taxation and so forth. But there was so much more clarity, and there was so much more alignment in those, maybe not how to get there, but everyone seemed to be fairly aligned, much more closely than we are now. There weren't as many social issues to deal with this great divide of that whole mess that is, I believe, has just been demonic, but also very divisive. Not obviously, it's divisive in regards to our values and our ways of life, but also divisive in getting in the way of true productivity, economically, militarily, national security. These social issues have just been used by Satan himself to get in the way of true productivity. I read through a lot of the initiatives of the new labor secretary, and this legislation, it sounds good on the surface. So I try to read through that. I didn't encounter a lot of the DEI things that you just brought up, but obviously a large portion of the people that we're speaking to, you would think would want to be in favor of labor unions, because I think that there was way back when an inherent value to them and a purpose and a reason because of the mistreatment. But that long since has been displaced by just laws and regulations that are inherent and rights given to all of us that have taken care of most of those issues. I think that's where I would have more celebrated 15 years ago, there being some infusion of the other side to make this. I don't want to make too much out of the representation or the look of it, but that there is some value to that. But even the nuts and bolts of policies and mindsets. But man, I just have to think that we need to be extremely careful in this day and age, infiltrating some of our departments with a liberal mindset.
Yeah, and just quickly, one of the things I know that Representative Chavez DeRaymer, I believe is her name, supported was a bill that would provide some level of amnesty, I think in the millions, to people who are here illegally. And she was only one of three Republicans to support that. So that was one of the things that caught my eye. But yeah, I have to agree with you. And I probably shouldn't admit this on my conservative leaning show. But looking back, I did the same thing. I went back to debates, and I have a decent level of respect, and I actually kind of liked President Bill Clinton, looking at actually, how he actually ran the country and the things he did. Of course, there were some things I disagree with, but yeah, even back, 24, 28 years ago, Bill Clinton looks like today a Republican. I mean, if you look at how he carried himself and the way he spoke and his strong stance against illegal immigration, I mean, these were common sense ideas. So I think, the purpose of the question is, we do need to be wise. And I think, I'm not even just speaking for conservatives, but just people who are voters, we should be attentive to, who are we voting for? Who are we putting into place? And also, I tend to support a lot of President Trump's policies, but we also should hold him accountable, and we should try to be objective and say, is this a good appointment, and look at what it's actually going to do. Because, for all the things I do like about Trump, I think, he can be a little bit surface level when it comes to some of the reasoning behind some of these appointments, but generally it works out, I would say, pretty well. So we can deal with that. It's a lot better than the other option, but yeah, we do need to be wise. So we will see how that turns out and how that plays out in the Labor Department. But as always, going to wrap up here, Mark, approaching 40 minutes. So appreciate your time. Hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving. Hope you are preparing for this long and hard Saturday and year following the